very different than the one that we're in now. But I'm really grateful that you all are here and that you're here to spend some time digging into this wonderful book. And I see that the author is in the waiting room, so I'm
Yep,
gonna keep my bit short. Thanks for having me.
perfect. And we'll give him just a moment to be able to finish getting all the way logged in. But I am thrilled to welcome tonight Professor David Faris, a professor of political science at Roosevelt University in Chicago, contributor to The Nation, to Slate, among many other places, author not only of The Kids Are All Left, but also tonight's book, It's Time to Fight Dirty. I've had the pleasure of hearing him as an interview guest on a number of shows and podcasts, most recently within about the last week on Slate's What Next with Mary Harris. Professor Ferris, hey, welcome. We're thrilled to have you tonight.
It wouldn't be
There
a
we go.
Zoom meeting. Wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if somebody did do that, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I've been teaching, so I taught Zoom University for like 3 years. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to join you. Really admire and appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm really honored that you have any interest in my book whatsoever. So I'm here to happy to answer any questions that you might have or talk through any questions you have about it and just have a good conversation. I'll stay with you until my children start screaming. So
Excellent. Well, there is one question that we kind of had teed up in variations from a couple of people beforehand.
sure.
So I'm taking a few of those variations and sort of synthesizing them into something in two parts. The first of those is, do you think we've missed our window? And related to that, if you were writing this today, what would you be saying differently?
Okay. Those are two great questions, two very different questions. Let me take the first one first, which is, did we miss our window? I mean, obviously, um, things would be very different if Democrats had been able to do some of these things in 2021 and 2022. I mean, I just think about like just DC and Puerto Rico statehood alone, right? It's not that we would hold the Senate, right? But we'd have a much larger deficit and a much smaller deficit in the Senate, and we'd have a lot less ground to make up this year and in 2028. And that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, right? And so obviously, in real time, it was very frustrating to watch Democrats take power with that very thin majority. Actually, they had two thin majorities, right? We had a 50-50 Senate with a tiebreaker, and then we had like a 5-seat majority in the House. And it was frustrating to watch Democrats sort of like able to do a bunch of things legislatively around policy, but not really tackle any of the bigger institutional problems that were facing us, aside from like the Electoral Count Act, which turned out to not necessarily be the thing that they needed to tackle first, right? Um, so I'll say, of course, we would be in much better shape if any of these things had happened. Okay. I will say it was also it's been heartening in some ways to see the extent to which a few of these things, I'm not taking credit for this, okay, but it's heartening to the extent to which a few of these things at least have become sort of default demands of the kind of Democratic rank and file, the progressive left. I think most Democrats in the House and Senate are on board with something like DC state. I mean, DC statehood got out of the House, right? I mean, there was a bill. It was sitting with the Senate. And had we been able to eliminate the filibuster and pursue it, DC would be a state right now. So in that sense, it's like there are some things that you look at and you're like, wow, we were really close to getting these things. An end to partisan gerrymandering, for example, DC statehood. I think we could get Puerto Rico statehood done. I think if we got clear signals from, folks in Puerto Rico about exactly what they want to happen there, right? If we don't want to impose it on them. Um, and I'll say a couple of other things, which is that when I wrote the book, especially when I wrote the manuscript in 2017, um, the idea of expanding the Supreme Court was like that was the thing. Actually, my wife is a lawyer. She at the time she was a clerk on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, and I had her read the manuscript, and she was like, "This is good, but like, David, I don't know, like packing the courts, man, that's pretty crazy, you know." And in the in the 8 ensuing years, unfortunately, I think the necessity of that has become clear to a lot more people. And it has gone from an idea that was pretty fringe and I'm like, obviously, like, I'm not the first person to think of expanding the courts. Okay. Like, what I did with this book was I packaged together a bunch um, of reforms, and I'm looking at the flaws of American democracy from the perspective of somebody that had mostly actually not studied the United States until that point. Um, but it's been heartening to me the extent to which court expansion, I think, is become kind of a core demand of the rank and file. Like, there's hardly any observers, I think, who are serious court watchers who don't recognize the need to expand the courts the next time Democrats get into power. Um, I think the work that we have to do, and it's a lot of work, is convincing our elected officials that these are things that they need to fight for and that they need to spend time and energy on. And that's hard because there are so many elections happening at once, right? I mean, we have a Senate primary happening here in Illinois right now. Honestly, really snuck up on me because we've been so focused on the ICE stuff that it's been hard to keep our eyes on the ball, all kinds of different things at once, right? I mean, like, I'm spending 4 to 6 hours a week running patrols at my child's elementary school, and it doesn't leave time for a lot else, right? Like, we're all very busy and we're all very tired. And I know the line, right? Like, Stephen Miller doesn't get tired, but people do get tired, right? And they get exhausted. So there's a very long answer to your question, Jeff. But the answer is no. Of course, like, we didn't miss the window, right? We missed an opportunity. I would say in a lot of ways we actually have extended the window because some of these ideas, through a lot of dedicated activism and writing of all kinds of different people, a lot of these ideas have become conventional wisdom, right? A couple of them are DOA since 2018, but some of them have become conventional wisdom, and that actually gives me a lot of hope and faith that at some point, if we kind of keep at this and don't lose heart and don't lose faith and hope, that we might be able to get some of these things across the line. Um, your second question was, what would I do different? What thing I would write differently? Um, I would do it exactly this. I know, do exactly the same.
That's a perfectly legitimate answer.
No, there was a couple of things. Okay, so I think there was a default assumption which I shared in 2017, 2018, that the higher the turnout, the better for Dems, right? And I think that that's like maybe still true, but I think that the last few elections should probably give us some pause. Not that we shouldn't try to boost turnout, right? We obviously should. But I think the idea that, like, boosting turnout alone will lead to better outcomes is not necessarily something that we can count on unless Democrats are really expending some time and energy thinking, like, trying to figure out what non-voters want. Like, who are not, like, this is the thing, actually, it's almost completely unstudied in political science. It drives me crazy. If I had the analytical skills and the money to do it, I would do it myself. But that's not the kind of place that Roosevelt is. So, but we don't know that much about non-voters, right? All we know is that, roughly 100 million eligible voters don't come out, even in a presidential election year, right? And I think I kind of, in some ways, in a little bit lazily, assumed, hey man, if we get 50 million of those people out, we'll win every time. And that's not clear to me that that's true anymore. Okay. My suspicion is that a lot of non-voters may not lean left in the way that we want them to, right? Or they're probably potentially swing voters, right? They're people that
Hmm.
we can convince, they're persuadable voters, but they're not necessarily like default left voters. So that's something that I would probably walk back. I hesitated at the last minute to call for mandatory voting, and I would take that back. I think that that's something that we should push, if only, not that I think they're necessarily going to get it, but as a principle is worth getting behind. Um, and trying to think of anything else that I would change. I mean, I guess, like, because it went nowhere, breaking up California, it's not like it couldn't happen. It's just, it was the thing about the book that the most people were like, absolutely not. you know, Especially people in California, they're like, no thanks. I see what you mean, but thank you, but no thank you. And it would be very logistically complicated. It would probably consume a lot of political capital that could be spent elsewhere. I think if you had a magic wand and you could do it, you would do it. If you're a new Democratic administration, you've got this magical trifecta for the first time in 10 years, and it's like you got like 8 months to get something done. Is that what you do? I don't know, right? I think in principle it's a good idea. In practice, I think it's like unless you had your ducks lined up exactly, like you have a referendum ready to go in California, you have the California legislature lined up and ready to go, you've got Congress behind it. It's just it's hard to, the the governing timeline in this country is so short. We're the only national legislature on the face of the earth that reelects its entire membership every 2 years. And that just does not give us a lot of time to govern. It means the next time that we do get power, we really need to have a prioritized list of the things that we want to get done. And that's going to be some policy. Obviously, that's why we're in this business, right? Like we want to make policy, we want to make changes for the better. We want to make good public policy. But we have to have a kind of a short list of institutional reforms that we think are the most important.
I mean,
Uh, I have my thoughts
you're
about
just
what that might be,
you're
but
describing a project 2029.
yes, exactly. Yeah. I actually thought about buying the domain name Project 29 right after the election, but I was like, no, I want to call it something else. That's tainted now. Okay. Something other than project. But yes, there are some people working on that kind of stuff. So, and I think you have to grudgingly respect the grunt work and the legwork that went into that, particularly putting together the kind of like personnel database of people willing to serve in a new administration.
Hmm.
Democratic think tank world is just not as well funded, as well organized, or as influential as their counterparts on the right. Unfortunately, and that's something that I would love to see change. So
Yeah, I mean, even that reminds me of the wonderful Will Rogers remark. I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Democrat.
exactly. Exactly.
Just in case nobody's ever heard that one before, but
That's right up there with I don't want nobody that nobody sent. That's a big Chicago one. I'm sure you've heard that one. So, yeah.
yeah, but so did and you actually do happen to be the first time we've been lucky enough to have an author with us. We had one that where just the time of day didn't work for them, but we very much try not to run these as a moderated thing. It is an open discussion.
Sure.
So, yep. So if we've got anybody who's got something else that they want to ask, please feel
Well,
free.
I would think that the easiest thing would be to make Election Day a holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some places it is, right? It is in Illinois.
It
Um,
is in Delaware.
yeah. But it should be a federal holiday, right?
Right.
Ideally it just wouldn't be on a Tuesday at all, but there's a certain point where sometimes you run into certain aspects of political culture that it's like it's probably best to just make that Tuesday a holiday, right? Rather than trying to switch the day of the week, which people would be like, whoa, that's not American. It's like, okay, sure. Let's make Tuesday a holiday then. Um, Certainly the public schools here are closed on this Tuesday election day, which I support, but it does also cause logistical problems for me. So that actually is something to keep in mind. That
You
you
had mentioned
propose.
doing a study on non-voters, and I
Yeah.
had seen, I believe it was the Rand Institute did a study. It might have been Pew, but it said the number one reason is because the system doesn't represent me, and so there's no like withdrawal just becomes like the logical point for them. Like so they're politically aware, but they're not convinced the system works for them.
Yeah,
Is
and
essentially what
you
it came
can't
down
blame
to.
them, right? I mean, it's like
Hmm.
it's hard to look at our political system and be like, that is a system that delivers right away for people that engage in it, right?
Hmm.
And if you're talking about Pew does this really wonderful thing that they update every 4 years or so. I actually haven't updated it last time I checked, but it's called the Pew Political Typology. And it's like a short, it's a not a very nuanced instrument, but it is like a 20 question quiz that will then place you into one of, I forget how many categories there were last time, like, I don't know, at least 9 categories of, so like, what is your relationship to the political system, right? And I think a lot of non-voters fall into this category that Pew says it's called a stressed sideliner. And that's somebody that can look at, they look at the gridlock, they look at all the yelling and the unpleasantness and the difficulty getting anything done in our political system. And they're like, you know what? What's on Netflix? So, and so I think it's the problem is that it's sort of a self-reinforcing pattern, right? Where it's like people don't think the political system delivers. One of our two parties gets a trifecta in Washington. They come in and they seem not to be able to pursue a lot of the things that they promised people. Now, I'm happy that that's the case right now. Okay. But as in a general sense, like things like the filibuster really degrade people's sense that the legislature that they just elected has the ability to make the changes that they want to see. And so every time we elect a new government and that government goes to Washington and they're like, I think that one of the things that's probably most puzzling to stress sideliners is they're like, wait a minute, I mean, I heard that Republicans control all the branches of Congress. Why can't they just pass a budget? Like this kind of stuff, right? Where it's like this sort of like super majoritarian forced bipartisanship, I actually don't think is very popular. People may kind of genuflect to it, but I don't actually think anybody truly believes in it. So anyway, people have good reason for feeling like the system doesn't do much for them, and it's kind of incumbent, and a system that doesn't have mandatory voting, it's incumbent on us to convince people that it's worth it.
Some people my my experience is a lot of the kids that I worked with, high school kids, they have no idea about who the government is. If you ask them who the vice president is, they wouldn't even be able to tell you. So that I think we have a poor civics education system in this country.
Yeah, I mean, this has been true my whole life. I remember getting elected student council president or something in like 1996. Okay, I'm going to tell you how old I am. But I was a senior in high school in 1996. I remember the person that was elected vice student council. I started talking about Al Gore, and she was like, "Who are you talking about?" Like, he's the vice president of the United States. Are you joking? And she was like, "Why should I know that? Who cares?" And I think another thing to keep in mind about young people, I spend a lot of time with younger voters and younger Americans and younger people. Obviously, it's my job. Very privileged to be able to do that. But they like if somebody walking into my classroom right now is 18 years old, their whole conscious life has been Trump. You know what I mean? They don't know anything else. They think this is what politics is, and they hate it. They're like, I mean, we're having trouble attracting majors. Like, would you want to study politics right now? The thing that I used to tell people what I did for a living, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's interesting." And now I tell people like what I do for a living. They're like, "You're a professor. What do you teach?" I'm like, "Politics." And they give you this look like someone died. They're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That must be really hard." I'm like, "It's not that hard. It's fine. It's fun. It's still fun for me." But like, it's hard to watch. And it's hard to inspire people to take part in a political system that keeps delivering these pretty dreadful outcomes over and over again. The reason that I wrote the book in the first place, I was like, I guess you read the book, so you know the story, right? I was like sitting, stewing in my own anger after the election in 2016, just thinking like, why do we keep like this twice? I mean, I turned 22, 2000 election, right? And then this, like right before I started having kids. Like, why do we keep losing elections that we won? Like, it's very frustrating, right? Like, why do we add up all that votes for the House? You add up all the votes for the Senate. We should have been running the country like three-quarters of the time of my adult life, but we keep losing because of these things, right? And these things are not a panacea, right? They're going to fix everything, but obviously we'd be in much better shape if I was king for a day. So anyway, Chris had a question, I think, in the chat.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks for being here, David.
Thanks for having me.
Well, kudos to Jeff. Good snag. What do you, the title of your book is Fighting, what is it? Fighting Dirty?
I didn't make that title, just saying that. I wanted to call it Multiply and Conquer, but they don't like that. So
Okay. I have to say my book budget's been a little thin lately. I haven't picked it up yet. I haven't had the pleasure. But I'm looking forward to reading it. I want to ask you, what should Democrats do tomorrow to fight dirty? What needs a little dirty fighting?
Well, it's funny you should ask that. I just read a bunch. I made the mistake of like opening the New York Times app before I got on this call. And it looks like Democrats are caving here for basically nothing. So big surprise. But sorry, I don't want to seem too cynical. Okay. It's good that people have forced the Senate leadership to at least like pretend to care about like the siege of our cities, right? But obviously we've not succeeded in getting them to care enough, right? So the mantra that I like, so if you eventually do read the book, which you're under no obligation to read an 8-year-old book, okay? But I keep begging Melville to like, can I put out a new edition? And they're like, no one buys books anymore. So like, okay, that's a very firm answer. But the mantra is like use the power that you have, right? So when we're in power, use it. You know, do the things that you said you would do, make the changes, like make people's lives better. I don't believe in giving ourselves an unfair advantage, right? But I do believe in changing the institutions so that there's a fair playing field. Right now, we do not have that kind of power, right? We're out of power in the Senate, we're out of power in the House, we got a conservative supermajority on the court, got this dipshit in the presidency, and we have the power that the opposition has in America. And until the Senate Republicans nuke the filibuster, we have a certain amount of control over the budget, and what they have to negotiate with us if they don't want to abolish the filibuster for anything but a reconciliation bill. I don't know if you know what that means. So right now, we have the power to grind things to a halt if we don't get some concessions, right? A lot of people were like very excited and thrilled when we did that in the fall, and very disappointed and sad when we just capitulated for no particular reason other than I feel like our leading senators were just bored and wanted to go back to their districts. And so, like, I don't know if you're asking like what we can do on this call or what Democrats in the Senate can do, but Democrats in the Senate can like get a backbone and put their feet down and be like, you're not getting a government. Like, we're not going to fund the government until you do X, Y, and Z, right? And like X, Y, and Z can be whatever we want it to be. I
Do
would
you
say, I want to be
consider
like
it?
a little bit realistic about it, but like, you know, ice out of Minnesota, right? Like masks off, like no more targeted sieges of blue cities because you hate us. Like, I mean, you know, you could imagine a list of 10 things that's like, we need these 10 things or we're not giving you money.
Why do you think they keep caving?
Um, I mean, there's two answers, right? Like one is super cynical and one isn't. The super cynical answer is that like I feel like there's this dynamic in the Democratic Party where a seat in the Senate or a seat in the House is a kind of a sinecure, right? And that sinecure is yours. And because so many House seats are uncompetitive, um, it doesn't really, you know, like, it's very hard to lose a general election in like 390 of the 435 seats in the House. And it's a well-paying job. It's not like an incredibly lucrative job, but it's a well-paying job. You can convert that well-paying job into all kinds of like even better paying things when you retire from the House or the Senate. And so there's like a very strong incentive to just like play ball. You know, like I'm in the Senate, ICE is not going to shoot me in the street probably. And so like let's just go along and get along and like these guys will be gone eventually. And I think that that dynamic is very strong, and it's particularly strong among the sort of longstanding kind of leadership class in the party. The less cynical answer is like that I mean, you're in the minority, and you don't get to call the shots. You know, you can try, but ultimately you don't get to call the shots. And you can kick and you can scream and you can stomp your feet and you can say, we're not funding the government. But eventually you start to hear the pressure from your constituents. And I think one of the things that happened in the fall, and I'll be honest with you, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Okay. I think there are enough Democrats in the Senate who are like pretty useless, and I would love to see them get gone. I don't think that most elected people, I don't think most elected officials are like that. I think most elected officials, they go to Washington for the right reasons. They have things they want to get done. You know, there's like 10% grifters and 90% people that want to do good. And the 90% that people that want to do good become like 70% people that want to do good. And then another 20% are like, wow, nothing's ever going to get done here. So who gives a shit? Right? Like I might as well just make money. But I think that there's a sense in the fall. I think one of the dynamics in the fall was, federal workers overwhelmingly vote Democratic. I mean, that's like a Democratic constituency, right? And after weeks and weeks and weeks of not getting paid, I mean, a lot of these folks have to go to work without getting paid. They can't strike, right? Federal workforce cannot strike. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. And they were starting to hear it. You know, I mean, the Democratic elected officials are starting to hear like, okay, I see you made your point, right? Like we should fund the ACA subsidies, but like it's not happening, right? Like you guys can stay out for as long as you want. They're not going to give it to you. We might as well just cut the best deal that we can get. My complaint about that is not that a deal was cut. It's that a deal was cut that didn't actually get anything. right? Like Democrats in the Senate keep cutting these deals that are like, um, I feel like Lucy in the football is an overused metaphor, but it really is like that,
It's
where,
wimpy.
yeah.
I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. And so it's like, and Trump is I hate the guy. Okay, but he's very good at this, where he's like, oh yeah, just like fund the government. We'll keep talking. Right? That's apparently what Senate Democrats agreed to tonight. Okay, I was sorry, I was busy putting my children to bed and everything. So I actually haven't time to dig into the actual agreement that was just made, I guess. But
Don't you think it's a good
Why do you,
development that that the DHS funding was split from the other five bills?
it's a good development, right? It gives us an opportunity, right? Like we have, I guess, 2 more weeks to try to coalesce around some demands. And if you wanted to be really generous to Senate Dems, you could say, like, this all happened so fast, right? Like a week ago, I forget when they shot Alex Preddy to death, but it was like about a week ago,
Less than
right?
a week.
Less than a week. Okay, so a week ago they were just willing to just be like, yeah, let's fund the government, like go home. And in the space of 6 days, have coalesced around an understanding that at the very least, the Democratic rank and file is just like not going to stand for this anymore. You know, I, there's a lot people can put up with, okay, but like open-ended sieges of like cities that vote overwhelmingly Democratic, and then Democrats in Congress are like, that's fine, that's not going to work for us anymore. It's frustrating to me that it took that
yeah.
to get us there, okay, because I've been living through this stuff for close to a year at this point, right? ICE has been all over my neighborhood. I live in the Rogers Park neighborhood of Chicago. It's a very diverse area on the north side. My kids go to a school. It's like the United Nations. Okay, there's like people from like 75 different countries at this school. It's awesome, right? I love it. But ICE knows, right? I mean,
Hmm.
ICE has been around my kids' school. I mean, like my friends have seen the school cook like abducted in front of the children and like dragged away. It's like this is stuff that like, shouldn't have taken like somebody getting gunned down on camera for us to
Why
say like this is not acceptable, right? But you're right. We're there. It's encouraging, and now we have 2 weeks to try to convince some Senate Democrats to really make a stand at this time. And I guess if you want to look at the glass half full case for that, it's like okay, well now we have 2 weeks, right? And now we use our power, which is protest, right? Which is organizing, which is phone calls, which is emails, right? I mean, we know the ways to put pressure on members of Congress. We show up at their town halls, right? Like we call them, we yell at them. I mean, obviously we're in Illinois. But Dick Durbin's still in office, right? And he's not always been on the right side of things. And he's of course he's retiring. But he's not like a ghoul, right? I mean, like he's
yeah.
like he like you could call his office. Like I used to know somebody that worked there. And he may be responsive to that kind of pressure. So like this is the 2 weeks where we try to put pressure on people. And
Why do you
that's
think
that
oh
better than like not having that opportunity, right?
Yep. Well, and a quick
why
pause because I do know what I've kind of been watching. We've got somebody who has been waiting for a question.
oh
So just but
mhm.
kind of just before that opportunity closes, Jennifer, I know you said you had something. Go.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thank you so much for writing this book. As painful as it was to read, and as many things we need to address, it's a great organizing for the future. My question is, have you talked with anybody in Congress about these issues? Have they asked you to come? Have you offered to come? And aside from them, what other groups or people do you know of that either you've spoken to or who are familiar with what you've written?
That's a great question. You know, Let me tell you a little life story. So I published this book when my wife was 8 months pregnant with our first child. And so I didn't have the opportunity to really tour behind it. And there were some things that maybe could have happened if this had happened at a different point in my life. Like this is going to sound crazy. Okay. I swear to God, I'm telling you the truth. But like Netflix wanted to do like a documentary based on this book and like send me to DC to like follow members of Congress around. And I was like, I can't do it. Like I've got a baby. The baby's really cute. Like I want to spend time with the baby. Like you gotta find somebody else to do this, man. I'm sorry. And So the short answer to your question is no, I have not really. I've never been invited to testify before Congress or anything. I will say, we invited. This was 7 years ago. We had. Do you know who Ben Wickler is? He's the chair of the Wisconsin Dems, and he was like one of the finalists to be the DNC chair. So we brought him to Roosevelt to speak, and he was like kind of a friend of a friend from when he was running Move On. And so he came to speak, and like I was like, here's a copy of my book. He's like, I know your book. He's like, everybody knows your book. He's like, they just don't want to be seen with it. Um, because of what it's called. He's like, Elizabeth Warren has read your book. He's like, he's like, everybody in DC has read your book. But like the title is such that like they can't necessarily be talking about it in public. Okay. He's like, all I can tell you is it's been influential. It's like starting conversations. Like people are aware of the arguments in your book. And that was good enough for me. I was like, man, you just say it again. And that's good. I can sleep tonight. So I would love to testify before Congress, but no one has invited me to. And I guess given the nature of some of the op-eds that I write, maybe they don't want to. But like, does that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad that so many were, silently reading it in the corner with paper bag on it or something.
Right, exactly. Like put like War and Peace in front of it or something. And
Right.
Yep.
Okay. That's
Okay, Sarah put her
encouraging.
question into the chat, but it was, why do you think Republicans have been so much more effective at fighting dirty than Democrats? Is it cultural, institutional, how each party understands power, or is it something else?
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think a really important factor is that throughout the course of the 21st century, Republicans have just had a leadership that's just like way more ruthless than ours. You know, um, you swap out like Mitch McConnell for Chuck Schumer, and that's a very different willingness to pursue power for its own sake. Um, and I think Republicans figured out long before we did that people don't actually care that much about procedural warfare. I think one of the reasons Democrats don't want to do some of this stuff is they're like, wow, the blowback's going to be crazy. Like, well, if we expand the court, like, that'll cost us the next election. Or if we, have you seen this idea that's floating around? That's like, you admit every ward in Washington, D.C. as a state, and then you just like rewrite the Constitution. I was like, oh man, what a great idea. I wish I come up with that. And it's like, I feel like Mitch McConnell would read that and be like, interesting, like maybe we'll do that, and Chuck Schumer's like, that's insane. I think Democrats are a little bit afraid of their own shadow in terms of like it's like, okay, if we do something escalatory, what are they going to do back to us? And the position that I've taken, I really do stand by this, is A, they're going to do it anyway. B, people will forget. Okay, one of the most frustrating things of the past 10 years to me has been like Republicans changed the rules for appointing people to the Supreme Court twice in 4 years.
Yes. Yes.
Just completely made it up. Right. Just utterly, just like hallucinated rules, like no Supreme Court picks in an election year. And it's like, you just go to Wikipedia. It's like there've been like 13 this century or in the 20th century. Right. And then, okay, in 2016, it was no Supreme Court picks in an election year. And, Scalia died in February of 2016. And they were like, you're just not doing it. No, no pick for you. 4 years later, Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies like 6 minutes before the election. And they're like, we're going to fill that right now. Oh, did we say no Supreme Court picks in an election year? What we meant was no Supreme Court picks in an election year unless you control the Senate.
So how do we get our elected officials, and I don't want to just interrupt anybody, but how do we get our elected officials? Because I understand, right? Like we don't want to operate like Mitch McConnell to that level. We don't want to play dirty, but we also realize like to win the game, we have to play dirty on some level. So like how do we get our elected officials to like recognize that we support this to the sense of like the Supreme Court thing? No, we're filling it done. We're not backing down. Versus like how they've come up with Project 2025 and these unhinged things that they're doing to our country. So how do we get them to move the needle to be more aggressive?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Sarah. I mean, I wish there was a magic wand that we could wave. I mean, I think one thing is just
Sorry,
like,
you fired me up with the Supreme Court stuff
no,
because
I know.
that's still
like
like
when
I can't, people can't bring that up around me. My friends are like, oh God, Sarah's here, don't mention that.
no, it just sends me like instantly, like I'm just like, I can't even talk about it without getting angry. And I think that, I mean, one thing that we have to do as like a empowered primary electorate is we have to hold people's feet to the fire about this stuff, right? There's a Senate primary unfolding in Illinois right now. Um, I don't want to tell you all what to do, okay? But I'm not like thrilled with the person leading that primary right now, right? Because this like Krishnamurti seems like the kind of person that would like not get behind a lot of this stuff, right? I could go on for a while about like what I think about. I kind of like about a couple of weeks ago I was like, oh right, we're filling Durbin's seat. Like, what's going on here? And I was like, oh, those are the choices. Okay, so interesting. But those are the choices we have, right? You know, it's like they're not terrible. Any of these people would be like a vast improvement over whatever like lunatic the Republicans are going to put forward, right? But like we have to put that person's feet to the fire, right? Like we have an opportunity, like we have, you know, we have a primary coming up. Like people should be asking questions in these debates, like in the town halls, like, will you vote to expand the court? Will you vote to set aside the filibuster? Right? Like if we can't abolish the filibuster and we don't expand the court, we might as well just go home. Okay, because the only things we'll be able to do is like whatever executive actions this Supreme Court decides that a Democrat is allowed to do. And I guarantee you that the theory the unitary executive theory will be like a lot slender under a Democratic presidency than it will be under a Republican presidency.
Yep.
And we really have to be able to make some of these things a litmus test. But people hate that phrase. But it's like I'm not vote. We have an open seat, Illinois 9, the ninth district in the House here, open right now. They have like 13 people running for this seat. Okay, one of them is like a 26-year-old influencer. There's like the mayor of Evanston. There's a lot of people running for this seat. Okay, and I'm like I don't, you know, whatever. D by your name, that's better than the alternative. But like I want to know. Are you going to vote to expand the court? Are you going to vote for DC statehood? Right? Will you vote to end partisan gerrymandering, like X, Y, and Z? More to me, much more important in terms of like a pre-election litmus test, thinking about what kind of person this person will be in office than a policy questionnaire. Okay, because the reality is like politics doesn't really matter what your policy position is if you're not willing to do any of this stuff. If you're not willing to do any of this stuff, it's like we're just gonna have another 2 years like we had, and it's like better than the alternative, but like fundamentally nothing really changed, right? I don't know if that answered your question, Sarah. But
Okay, Liz.
No, that did. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Before I ask my question, my colleague Jesse Bacon says hi.
Jesse!
Yeah, he was very excited that you were coming tonight. You partially answered my question in the last answer, but I'm thinking about what the opportunity of the upcoming election is, especially in primary races, and I'm curious what it looks like to fight dirty electorally as a base, and what you think it looks like to use this upcoming election as an opportunity to reshape the party.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's two ways to have like big structural change in American politics, right? You can replace one of the parties. Last time that happened was in like the 1850s, or you take the party over. And I happen to think that the Democratic Party is like very ripe for the kind of like a kind of a Tea Party like takeover. And people hear that and they're like, well, that seems bad. I'm not making a moral equivalence here, right? But like what happens to be true is that the party leadership and the party elite is like pretty out of step with the rank and file on a number of different issues. You know, it's not just like Israel Gaza, right? It's not just Medicare for all. It's a lot of things, right? But I happen to think, and a lot, you know, again, I didn't come up with this point. Right? A lot of people have been saying this, but the biggest divide in the Democratic Party right now, in my mind, is not like the Bernie, Hillary, you know, moderate, progressive stuff. It's really about like how you intend to use your power. Or like how aggressively do you plan to pursue, right? Like the restoration of democracy, right? Like the creation of a true, like long-lasting multiracial democracy. You cannot, I'm here to tell you as a political scientist, you cannot coup-proof a democracy 100%. Okay, it's not possible. But it can be better than it is. How much energy are you willing to expend on that? Okay, and I think as a primary electorate, we need to stop fighting the 2016 primary, and we need to start fighting the 2026, 2028, and 2030 primaries, which I think should be about how committed are you to sort of like structural transformation of the political system using the power that you have under the US Constitution. Remember, like quiz, you know, Robin Kelly, like Krishnamurti, all these people. Is the Senate filibuster rule in the Constitution, yes or no? You know, like, is the number 9 on the Supreme Court, is that in the Constitution, yes or no? Right? If it's not in the Constitution, then we can do it. Okay. And you can make a lot of changes in this country just using the the power that the Constitution, for all of its flaws, gives the majority party in Washington, that Democrats have not been willing to do for a long time. And
I
so
think the Wyoming rule would be another great start.
what's that?
I said I think the Wyoming rule would be another great start.
We said we could come up with a long list and present it
But
to our leaders, right?
yep,
But I think like
that one is an easy to explain to people method of expanding the House.
yes, yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I think like, the reality is like the people who are on the front lines, like holding the line on democracy, like organizing these protests, are the people in this room, right? Like are ordinary people who are frankly like outclassing their elected officials by like orders of magnitude right now. And so there's no single way to go about that. I think it's like you use the primary process to push for people that will do these things. You run for office yourself, I mean, I'm sure you all know Run for Something and like all these groups that are trying to get young folks into politics and running for office and doing good things. Um, we need like better like charlatan radar, I guess. Like it's been very disappointing to see people like Kirsten Sinema and John Fetterman like get into office running as progressives and then turn around and be like, actually, the person I admire the most is Joe Manchin. So it's like, again, there's no button to press to be like, we're going to transform the party. But I think it's like people working in these groups who are doing the really hard work of defending democracy right now. We need to demand our due in the process, right? It's like we're not, it's like if you're going to keep rolling over and over again, like why should people take to the streets into, I don't know when the next No Kings protest is, you tell me, right?
It just got announced the other day. It's March 28th.
There it is. March 28th. Am I going to be here? Yes, I will. So it's like there's an extent to which the Democratic primary electorate, I'm actually writing a piece about this for The Nation right now, about like, the 2028 primary, not to get ahead of ourselves, right? But like, I feel like Democrat way more than Republicans. Like when Democrats think about a presidential primary, they're like, will they like us? Like who should we pick that they will like? Who will get elected? Who will elect us? Like why don't people like us? Like it's just like pick pick who you love. Pick the people that will do the things you want them to do. If that's AOC, great. If that's Buttigieg, great. And it doesn't, like again, I don't want to refight the 2016 primary. I think like that's something we really need to put behind us. And the thing that we need to put in front of us is like a commitment, party-wide commitment to use and wield our power as often as we can to the best of our ability, like not to do like terrible things, not to make it unfair, like not to like make it impossible for Republicans to win an election, but to level the playing field, and to put people into office. I know you can't know, and the thing is, you can't always know, right? Like somebody can look good on paper and say all the right things in a debate, answer the right way in a questionnaire, and then they get into office, and it's like the David Souter problem for Republicans on the court, right? It's like ultimately you just never really know what's in a person's heart or the forces that they're going to encounter when they get to Washington. I mean, that's like an undersold issue here. Is like, do you remember when AOC first went to Congress and she was like live tweeting the orientation, like, and she was like, so seems like our congressional orientation is just like run by a bunch of lobbyists. Like this is messed up. And that power structure in DC really can wear on people. It can take people who intend they get into DC and they're like, I'm going to do the right thing. And then after years and years and years of like, just take the call from NVIDIA, like, what's the big deal? Like after that kind of shit for like 10 years, they fold. And I think there's a real sense in which like that next government, should we be lucky enough to get into the trifecta in DC, those people need to be able to hit the ground running with a Project 2029 like document. Because again, like you have like 12 months to govern. You have 12 months, like the second you do your second reconciliation year bill in year two, and then you're basically done. Then it's time to fight the election. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, Liz, but those are my thoughts.
Okay.
That's it for me.
One that popped up in the chat as you were answering. Why do you call it playing dirty? Because it does seem like everything you're discussing there is legal and moral. And as sort of a follow-on to that, why do the conservatives want a unitary executive and a president who can't be held accountable?
Very good question. So the fight dirty thing again, I didn't make the title for the book. Like what happened was I submitted. Um, I think the actual title that I submitted was "Multiply and Conquer: How Progressives Can Build a Democrat, like a lasting majority," whatever, something like that, right? And the publishers were like, "That's really good. That's very noble, and we appreciate your nobility. But unfortunately, that's not going to sell books. What's going to sell books is the word dirty." And I'll tell you who didn't love that was my dean, who had funded my research. And so anyway, you're right, right? Like nothing, I don't think anything in the book is like dirty, right? Like dirty to me is like underhanded, right? It's like unfair. It's like lying to people. And I don't believe in lying to people, right? Like I don't want to be like, we absolutely won't expand the court and then get into office and expand the court. Like tell people what you're going to do and then do it. To me, these are very sensible structural reforms that arose out of my study of comparative politics and comparative democracy. Like looking at American democracy kind of through the lens of like European democracy and being like, we could do some things here that are not happening. And so the short answer to that is no, I don't actually think that these things is underhanded or dirty at all. And that's actually one of the critiques that the book often received was like, this isn't radical enough, actually. This is just like messing around with the institutions and like this isn't going to change anything. Which, like fair enough, right? Um, sorry, what was the second part of the question? Oh, the unitary executive. Why do they want a unitary executive? Because they're drunk on power. I mean, right? Like, um, they have figured out that the theory, like the judicial philosophy of the unitary executive theory, which was a completely fringe idea even like 15 years ago. You remember like Bush tried to do it and people were like, "Wait, man, what are you doing?" Like John, like I mean, the John Yoo torture memo, like all this stuff can be traced back to the Bush years. Um, but the unitary executive theory is what serves Republican political power. Like my theory that the conservative majority on the Supreme Court is like they don't actually really have any principles at all. The principle is like what will serve Republican political power in this moment today. And what serves Republican political power in this moment today is the unitary executive theory that they didn't hold, oh, what was that, 2 years ago? Like the thing that drives me the most crazy is they were like, you can't do student loan. Like we could debate whether student loan relief is a good policy or bad policy. Okay. But like Biden tried to do it. The Higher Education Act very clearly gives the president the authority to forgive loans if they want to, right? And the Supreme Court was like, you can't do that. You can't do that without Congress. 2 years later, right? It's not just that they said you can do whatever you want with the Higher Ed Act. You could just dismantle the Department of Education without Congress's permission, like full stop, and that's great. So ultimately, there isn't a consistent application of a judicial philosophy here. There's a consistent application of power. And I don't think it's an accident that like half the members of the conservative majority in that court were like former Republican operatives. Or like Kavanaugh worked on the like Kavanaugh and Roberts like worked on the recount in 2000, right? They were probably part of the Brooks Brothers riot.
As also, I think Gorsuch is the other one who did. It's either Gorsuch or ACB.
I think it was Gorsuch. I have to check. I mean, like, look, they're just partisans, right? And they may not even recognize it themselves. Like, I don't think Brett Kavanaugh wakes up in the morning and he's like, I'm just a piece of shit operative, just serving power. I'm sure he rationalizes it in some way to himself, right? And that it's not like we're all capable of that. Okay, it's not like I've never like reflecting on my entire adult life. Like, have I ever taken a position that seems self-serving? Like, of course, like everybody does this, right? It's human. It's being human. But these guys have taken it to a whole different level, right? And their political project is to reinforce power wherever they can. And if they smack down the tariffs, I'll tell you, it's not because there's no philosophical objection there. They just think it's bad for Republicans to be able to do this. Like they think tariffs are going to cost them the election. They'll declare the tariffs illegal. I think one of the reasons they may be revisiting the Kavanaugh stop, shadow docket stuff, is they can see how bad it's playing. They don't care. I don't care about people, right? It's like, well, this is playing badly. It might cost Republicans their offices, and so we have to walk it back. I couldn't overstate the lack of respect that I have for the Supreme Court right now. But I am again heartened to see the public opinion moving, right? Like the Democrats are pretty united. It's like we get into power. My plan would be like if I'm elected president, I would call the six conservatives into my office and just be like, you guys can resign, keep the number at 9 if you want, or we're gonna pack the court. I give a shit, do whatever you want. But like one way or another, we're getting a liberal majority on this court. I haven't breathed air on the planet Earth under a liberal court majority, and I'm 48. So it's like it is time.
Yep. Okay. I know Chris had an electronic hand up a while back.
Thank you. David, two questions,
Yeah.
wildly divergent. The second one is, as a blasphemy, which book would you recommend that speaks to the current moment that's spoken to you? And the first question is, how do we devolve power away from the president? How do we make the government function as it should? What safeguards do we need to put in place that are ironclad?
Yeah, great question. I'll answer them in order. There's a great book out right now by a writer named Osita Nwanabu called The Right of the People. And it's a book about like here, I'll put it in the chat. He calls it a second founding, you know. And it's like a pretty far-ranging reimagining of the constitutional order, varying degrees of realism, but it's really well written. And I think it's like phenomenally well timed in terms of like the intersection of like what's happening with what he's writing. I would go pick that up right now. It's like it's if I could have written a book in 2025, like I wish I had written that book. It's very good. And the second part, I just was some of you guys know this magazine called Liberal Currents. Some of the writer there contacted me and asked me to same question you just asked me, right? Like how do you rein in the presidency in this country, right? And I think it's worth thinking about. This obviously is not in my book, but like it's really worth thinking about as part of Project 2029. What are 5 or 6 things that Congress could do to reclaim its power under the Constitution? You know, we've drifted into this predicament for a variety of reasons. Like one of it is like, Republicans are just better at applying power, and they've been doing it for a long time. But to be fair, the political system has not been working very well my entire adult life, right? It practically invites an aggressive executive to get things done that the legislature seems incapable of doing itself, right? Like, so we're all mad at the unitary executive theory or executive overreach, but like we all loved the Dreamer thing when Obama did it, right? And he did that because he couldn't get immigration reform through Congress. So like one of the best ways to restrain the presidency would be to make Congress work again. One of the best ways to make Congress work again would be to abolish the filibuster and abolish partisan gerrymandering. Like I just don't think that we're going to get to a point where we can say like we're going to have a well-functioning democracy as long as like 90% of the seats in the House are uncompetitive, right? Because the dynamic that sets up is that the only competitive race you will ever face as a member of the House is your primary. Only people you ever have to face are your own voters. And like, look, I love our voters, but it's not a good dynamic, right? Like it's if you only have to answer to one side of the aisle, and it's like you literally could not lose a general election if you were like caught with a dead body in your trunk. That seems bad for democracy to me, right? So I think the two of the most important things, gerrymandering reform, right? You got to make more House seats competitive. Like I would love to push for the Fair Representation Act, which is the idea from the book about multi-member districts for the House and proportional representation through ranked choice voting. I think that would do a lot. Again, there's no magic wand going to get us out of this predicament overnight, right? But like you take a bunch of these things together, I think they would work. So you make Congress work again, and then you have Congress just reassert its authority. That's another reason you have to pack the court, because like if Congress tries to pass a new War Powers Act, that's like, hey, I was just rereading the Constitution. It doesn't seem like there's a clause that says you get to kidnap the leaders of other countries and just like have them face trial for like random drug charges like that you made up last night. You can try to do that, but if the court steps in and says like, actually, under the unitary executive theory, the president can do whatever he wants. Like, it's like John Roberts did so much of this to us, right? This conservative court, when it invented an imperial presidency, like came up with a sophisticated sounding but truly lunatic judicial philosophy to cover it, right? Like Roberts and the court really put us in this predicament, right? You have to have a liberal majority. When you have the liberal majority, then you can pass laws to restrain the presidency, right? Like you just have to reverse Trump v. United States, right? You have to pass a law that's like, actually, we can prosecute you for crimes committed in office. And if you commit crimes, we're going to prosecute you and prosecute the crimes and make the penalties real. Like, I'm not like a carceral person, right? Like, I don't care whether people are in jail. I just want them to not do the thing anymore. And the reality is, like, one of the things that really bothered me the most about the first Trump administration, just tell me if I'm babbling and you guys are like, are we out of time? I don't even know. But like, once I get started on this stuff, it's hard to.
Yeah, we've officially got we officially have a cushion of about 15 minutes. I do see two other questions that have popped in.
Okay, let me just say, the Hatch Act, right? The Hatch Act is a law that says like you can't use your federal office to like campaign for one of the two political parties. And Republicans just like flouted that law like over and over and over again over the last 10 years. It's like, yeah, we're actually going to hold a campaign rally from the Rose Garden. We're going to have like DHS put out not just like Nazi propaganda, but like open partisan stuff, right? We're going to have Trump get in front of the army and be like, Democrats are terrible. All of these things are flagrant violations of this very obscure law called the Hatch Act. Okay. And if you want to restrain the executive branch, you have to make these laws real. You have to turn Pinocchio into a real boy. And that means passing a bunch of laws out of Congress to restrain the president and putting a Supreme Court into place that will actually uphold those laws. And I'll stop there.
Okay. So the first of the two that we've sort of been waiting on came from Lori and was saying, if we haven't had a new party since the 1850s, what do we do about a non-functional Republican Party leaning into fascism, and what's the future of a two-party system?
Well, I don't like where this is all headed. You know what I mean? I've got a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I don't know what to say to them anymore. I will say that my 7-year-old, who was, I guess, 6 at the time, I woke up the day after the election. He was like, "Dad, what happened?" And I was like, "Well, nothing good, bro." And he was like, "Don't worry, it's just 4 years." He just like went off to school without a care in the world. Little did he know. This is the problem with the two-party system. Right? This is something I've been kind of trying to shout from the rafters for a long time, which is under the current setup, like we're polarized. People have these like ingrained partisan identities, and there's only two choices. It doesn't matter how crazy Republicans become, they will have an opportunity to win again. Okay, we can do everything in my book. We can do like all of your best ideas, and at some point, these guys are going to win again. That's just the nature of politics, right? Like we're going to get into office, we're going to do things. It's going to activate the people that are disadvantaged by the changes that we want to make. Like hell hath no fury. Like all the people that work in in private health insurance that are going to be really angry about Medicare for all, and we'll organize and we'll vote, right? Like you make big changes to American society, there's going to be a backlash, and like people will get back into power. And that's why, to me, it's so imperative that you put reforms into place that will give us a real multi-party democracy. One of the things that you're seeing in European democracies that are menaced by these fascist parties is you see all the other parties get together in a grand coalition, be like, anybody but these guys. It doesn't always work, but it's very effective. And we can't do that here because we already have grand coalitions. And the grand coalitions are called the Democratic and Republican parties. And we're all smushed up together with our friends and allies, left, center, left, whatever. We don't always love each other. In an ideal world, we'd be 2 or 3 or 4 parties, right? And so to me, the multi-member districts thing, while it may be one of the ideas in the book that's like kind of furthest from fruition in terms of like where we are narratively, I think it's actually one of the most important things. Because to break this pattern, there's a political scientist named Morris Fiorina that wrote a book called Unstable Majorities, that just talks about why can't think about the 21st century. Nobody's been able to stay in power for more than 2-4 years, right? Like this is very unusual in American history. Like most of the 20th century was these long periods of partisan dominance of our politics, and we can't seem to get that. I would love for it to be us, because I would really love for it not to be them. So I don't know if that answers your question. We have a two-party system, right? It's very hard to break that. because in political science, we really believe very strongly that our electoral system, it doesn't guarantee two parties, but it guarantees like fewer meaningful parties than we would otherwise have, right? So I've always been a big proponent of like you got to reform the electoral system. You can have all the smaller parties that you want, and those smaller parties have their own problems, most of which is that they're very extreme relative to the norm. But they also just have these structural problems that other smaller parties and other democracies don't have. So I think it's really, really important to pass some reforms that could be painful to pass, right? Like they would jeopardize your own seat. But you have to do it for the future. And like and as far as I can tell, sorry, I'm waving around like my kid's bluey toothbrush here. So, we have a lot of work to do about that. That's something I've been thinking about actually, is I haven't been spending a lot of time writing and thinking about multi-member districts, but I actually think that's like really, really important. So I'll stop there.
Okay. The other one that had come in is that Trump has announced an emergency via the 1976 National Emergencies Act and gained 132 new powers. Shall we vote if there is an emergency in 2026?
Are you asking like whether there will still be an election, or if he does this, or what's the?
Yeah, Claire, you want to clarify?
In my book, there isn't an emergency.
Right.
He made up an emergency for immigration or drugs. And almost every time he calls an emergency, it's something that actually the rate is going down. So, I mean, ideally, our Congress would just tell him there's no emergency.
Yes.
Sit back down.
Well, I mean, this is actually, I'm really glad you brought this up, okay? Because the National Emergencies Act is insane. It's an insane law, right? It gives the executive branch the ability to just hallucinate an emergency and then unlock. It seems like you've read the Brennan Center report that's like, these are the 175 powers that an emergency declaration can unlock. And thank God, Trump has not, I don't think he's actually figured out a lot of this stuff. Maybe Russell Vought knows and he's about to tell him. But this is another thing we have to rein in. Okay. Like Congress needs to pass a law that's like you don't just get to hallucinate an emergency and declare it. Right? There needs to be better procedures here. Congress needs to be, I mean, Congress could terminate the emergency, right? But one of the things that our founders did not foresee is the role that partisan politics would play in contemporary America. It's the reason that impeachment doesn't work. Right? Impeachment, like we've literally never impeached and removed a president from office. Literally never in American history. Like, it was a pretty old country at this point. And several of them like richly deserved it. And it's never been done because partisan politics just kicks in and you can't get it through the Senate because the bar is too high. I would love to see those thresholds set at 60%. Like, yes, if one of the parties got 60%, they could do some mayhem with that, right? But I would prefer that danger to the one that we have, which is that like there's just the mechanism that we have to hold a president accountable, and the Supreme Court says there's no other mechanism. You can't hold them criminally accountable for anything. You can impeach them and convict them and remove them from office. We can't do that either, right? So it's like another way that the presidency is imperial. You got to roll that back too. This is another reason I think that we need a very well-funded think tank dedicated to coming up with a long list of proposals and laws that might capably rein in this out of control executive. Again, I've thought about starting that think tank myself, but not going to happen anytime soon. So thank you for the question. I think I'm probably stepping on the rest of your evenings here. So
we do tend to give things a little bit of a cushion, but but we are thrilled to have had you here. Just in case, for not only for you, but for anybody who is in the call, because even if we're not talking about your own book, you're welcome back to join us anytime. Next week is the third in what's been a series that's a short course on electioneering, where in January, we started with Politics is for Power by Eitan Hirsch. And we're trying to really focus on what are the things we can do to make the sorts of activism that we try to undertake more effective. That led into what are the things that we should be using it for with It's Time to Fight Dirty. and then next month, looking at the very prescient set of scenarios that Rick Hassan was laying out even back in 2020 with his election meltdown. Because I think there are very few people on the call right now who don't think that we're going to be immune from some kind of attempt to mess with the election. And what can we do to safeguard it?
Yeah, that's a great. Rick Hazen is incredible. That's a great book. You'll have a great time. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. It's been really, really fun. And I just want to say, I mean this honestly, Indivisible has been the most important organization founded in this country in the last like 20 years. It's an incredible organization. The top of the leadership is incredible, but the energy obviously comes from the chapters. And you all are doing very difficult and very thankless work. And everybody that wants to see American democracy have a future is counting on you to keep it up. I don't know what else to say. So thank you. Thank you. I mean,
Thank you for coming. We
I
really
just wrote a book.
like-
Like you guys are doing the hard work, so
Well, this was great.
thank you.
Yep, we greatly appreciate having had you here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'd be happy to come back anytime. Just let me know. And
It is generally the last Thursday of the month. You are welcome anytime.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Good night. Thanks.
Good night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
folks.
Thank you.